Hey there, Midas Letter subscribers, viewers, traders, and investors. I have a special guest today. Dan Ahrens is the Chief Operating Officer of AdvisorShares Investments, who are the portfolio managers of the pure U.S. Cannabis ETF. Trades on the NYSE under the symbol MSOS. Dan, welcome.
Glad to be here. I always like talking about cannabis funds.
I'm sure. Not only are you the manager of the cannabis fund, but you actually wrote the book on investing in cannabis, and to me that's just fascinating. I've had delusions of doing something similar, but of course procrastination is my guiding principle in life, so I didn't do it yet. But tell me about the book, and did you write the book out of your experience as a portfolio manager, or did you become the portfolio manager because you wrote the book?
Well, the portfolio manager came first. We launched our first cannabis ETF in the United States in April of 19. That's the AdvisorShares Pure Cannabis ETF. That ticker symbol is YOLO. And then much more recently, in September of 20, we opened the Pure US Cannabis, obviously only US focused, ticker symbol MSOS or MSOs. That one launched in September of 2020. But early in 2020, or maybe after launching YOLO, I'm not sure when, Wiley sought me out. They saw this big movement happening in cannabis investing. They sought me out, asked me if I wanted to write a book. And after going back and forth a little bit with my busy schedule, I said, sure. I thought it was win-win. That book was actually released on Election Day in November, and Election Day in the United States was pretty big for cannabis. So the book's available everywhere. It's Investing in Cannabis, published by Wiley. It's available on Amazon, but it really talks about, comparing cannabis to the prohibition on alcohol back in the day. It really goes through a lot of history. Why is cannabis illegal in the first place? It gets into the big differences between Canada and the United States and what people really need to understand. And then it gets into companies that people might want to invest in.
Sounds like I could benefit from reading this book myself, which I am now going to do. Okay, so Dan, let's talk about your portfolio, your ETF rather. How has it performed in the last, since its founding?
Well, our fund, YOLO, the first one, opened in April of 19, and admittedly, almost everybody in cannabis lost money in 2019. And then we came around to 2020, and things started to rebound. But this is really important to point out. I started to say, cannabis is going to separate the good companies from the bad, the profitable and strong balance sheet companies from those that don't. And more often than not, the US was going to separate from Canada. So for 2020 calendar year, our fund YOLO was up about 47%. The biggest cannabis index fund, there's only one fund at that time that was bigger than ours, it was negative in 2020. It was negative in 2020. Our fund YOLO outperformed it by 50-something percent. And that's for a couple of reasons. Again, companies separated. Those with profitability and strong balance sheets, and more often than not, the US side of the border profited or did well, the stocks did. Some of the others did not. Now, we also are actively managed. So there's a lot to say for picking the right stocks. We're not overly active. We're not trading constantly and not high turnover, but we're picking the right stocks, we believe. And in a fast-paced, rapidly changing area like cannabis, where there's a lot of disconnect between education about the US versus Canada side of the border, active management is very important. And, there's a big difference there. We launched our MSOS fund in September, and it's up over 60% since it launched. It's up nicely, but cannabis stocks is it's a tale of two cities, if you will. A big run up after the US elections, November, December, January, and then they had this runoff in Georgia where the Democrats got control of the Senate. and people bought cannabis stocks in the US and Canada, like, hey, it's going to be legalized in the US next week. let's everybody buy in. It's going to be the Wild West of cannabis. And then that's not the case. You know,
Right.
Politicians still got to be politicians. It's messy. It takes some time. Cannabis stocks have pulled back in recent months, and brings us to where we are now at the mid-May.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny you say that. When the rebound started happening in the cannabis space, and it uplifted the Canadian stocks as well as the Americans, as if there was no difference. To me, that was very fascinating because, as one of our other guests mentioned, he says the projected EBITDA of the top 5 Canadian cannabis companies in 2021 is expected to be 0. And he said, contrasting that with the top 5 U.S. cannabis companies, the multi-state operators, Trulieve, Curaleaf, etc., there's a much more substantial financial platform in play there. So, I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm sure you're not surprised. And just, I guess it was just yesterday, the day before, was it that Trulieve announced the acquisition of Harvest Health and Recreation, thereby
Big one.
putting a lot of long-suffering shareholders out of their misery on the Harvest side. Which are your favorite companies now? I mean, if we looked at your portfolio, that's obviously going to be a reflection, but which are your favorites right now and why?
Sure. So again, we're talking about the U.S. primarily here, and I'm glad you mentioned the big disconnect with earnings. These U.S. companies have been forced to operate in a frugal manner, in a financially sound manner. You're not going to see outrageous executive pay. You're not going to see, dilution of shareholders happening again and again, like you see in the dumpster fire that's called Aurora, and a number of other Canadian companies. So my favorites, and I'm going to point out, if people look at our website, our ETF has daily transparency. That means the holdings are listed every single day, the next business day. People can't see what I'm doing before I do it. Right. But look right there at our holdings. Curaleaf is right there at the top. I'm going to point out I'm wearing a little Curaleaf gear right now. But they are the, before this merger goes complete, they are the world's largest cannabis company by sales. And I hear news every day. The Canadians will try to disagree with you. Oh, look at Aphria and what's now called Tilray after their merger. We're bigger. Well, not by sales, you're not. And certainly not by a lot of other metrics, you're not. Curaleaf's the world's biggest. They have much more money losing real estate. They operate in 23 states. They've done an acquisition to grow into Europe. And that's not even counting additional states that are going to come online, like adult use in the state of New York. Curaleaf is the behemoth. Now, their growth metric has been to be in the most states, to have the biggest footprint, because the U.S. opportunity is, at least 10 times the size of the Canadian opportunity. Now, right behind them, Green Thumb Industries, another big favorite of ours. They have a big footprint primarily in the Midwest, but they are also a big growth strategy. And a lot of analysts out there have said this is one of their favorite picks for 2021, 2022. I can't mention those without mentioning a couple of others that are called the Big Four in the United States. Trulieve. Now, Trulieve's an interesting company. They're liked just as much by all the analysts, but for a long period of time, people said they're practically a single state operator, not a multi-state operator. They dominate in Florida. They have over 50% market share in Florida. Florida is one of the best medical markets in the United States, and everybody said it's only a matter of time until they approve adult use in the next couple of years. Well, Trulieve dominates there. In recent years, they've moved into other states, and then, as you said earlier, they just did this big acquisition of Harvest Health, where I'm confident they'll dominate in Arizona and Pennsylvania as well. That's why they did that acquisition. But their growth model's been very different than Curaleaf's. they are very profitable. They've been extremely financially sound and frugal in their growth, operating quarter after quarter with profits. And that word profits is rather unheard of on the Canadian side of the border. And the last of the big four is Cresco Labs. Cresco Labs, headquartered in Chicago, a very good footprint in the state of Illinois. That's been a great adult use recreational market, and growing in a number of other areas. So these big four, or even 5, 6, or 7 MSOs in the United States are very financially sound companies that are on the front end of all this growth in the United States. There's a lot to like.
So the United States has this persistent condition of non-interstate commerce, and
Yep.
to me, that's the barricade from the real horse race. As soon as the interstate commerce thing goes viable on a national strategy administering both recreational and medical cannabis, that's when I think the U.S. really, the horse that is the United States in the cannabis game really gets up to its full speed. And that's the moment I'm most excited about. When do you see that happening?
Soon. There's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what's going to happen. People throw around the term, oh, when U.S. legalization happens. Well, in my humble opinion, I don't think U.S. legalization, by a certain definition, is ever going to happen. And what I mean there, it's never going to be adult use legal coast to coast and available in all jurisdictions. That wasn't even in the Democratic Party platform at the most extreme. What they talked about is decriminalization, taking it off of the DEA Schedule 1 list, doing safe banking. Now, if you deschedule it and you do safe banking, you should be also get another level of reform, which is called 280E. Right now, part of the tax code says these companies can't even deduct their business expenses. It's rather outrageous, but if you deschedule it and do the safe banking, you should be able to do the extra caveat of getting rid of 280E. They've talked about medical marijuana coast to coast legal. That would be a big step. And then everybody says leaving it up to the states. Even the most liberal Democrats that are really for cannabis reform are talking about leaving it up to the states for adult use. Now, part of that, as you said, James, might be interstate commerce in states where it's legal. Now, another point where this gets really messy is, does that mean a company like Tilray can come into the United States? Nobody knows. Now, the Canadian CEOs love to talk about the United States because what else are they going to say? Are they going to say we're screwed, we don't have a chance? No, all they talk about is getting into the United States. But it's a real big unknown. And a lot of people think, even if interstate commerce comes, does that mean a Canadian company can come in the US? They may or may not. They may be able to do it by acquisition or joint venture or something. And they're still going to be way behind the game when it comes to licenses, which are very valuable. There's still going to be state by state regulation, even if we have interstate commerce. And it's all coming sometime in the next couple of years, but politicians got to be politicians, and it's really messy.
Yeah, you bet. Todd Harrison, who we talked about before the segment, portfolio manager at CB1 Capital, I believe it is.
Yep.
He made a good point. I saw him on an interview saying that, it really doesn't matter about interstate commerce or federal prohibition. He says no matter what, these companies are going to start making money hand over fist off the jurisdictions where it is legal, and he's largely shown right. That 280E caveat coming off, does that really sort of take the lid off the jar of profitability for these bigger incumbents at this point, if it happens?
Well, you had a great point, and what Todd said is very true. Now, if you look strictly at the financials, and we're right in the middle of earnings right now, and Curaleaf came out with earnings, Green Thumb came out with earnings, and they are very strong earnings, and they're raising guidance. these companies are knocking it out of the park right now in the United States under the current limits. And a lot of people say it's like they're operating with one hand tied behind their back. So even if nothing changes reform-wise, these companies are operating in a great manner. Plus, we're going to have adult use coming online in New York next year. They're saying the New York market might be bigger than the California market. The California market's currently the biggest market in the world. California alone is bigger than Canada. So it's not based on population. It's based partially on population, partly on what sales are going to be. So New York's just one state. So again, these companies are already operating very profitably. Their growth metrics are fantastic. With the pullback, you know, the multiples are just looking more and more attractive. They can only, you know, lag or tread water for so long. I think we're going to see another big breakout like we had in late 2020 and early 2001. And when they pass safe banking, when they pass or fix the 280E, when they decriminalize it, a big one is when they allow these companies to uplist to the New York Stock Exchange. That is going to be a huge positive. But once again, these companies are operating very good right now financially. If nothing changes, it's a night and day difference from some of the financials you see on the Canadian side of the border.
Yeah, you bet.
So
Dan,
we're bullish to say the least.
Yeah, great. Well, on that note, Dan, we're going to leave it there. I could obviously talk to you for hours about this, and I will look forward to coming back to you as soon as it makes sense. I want to thank you very much for your time today. Encourage everybody to go out and get a copy of Investing in Cannabis, the book written by Dan Ahrens.
Thank you.
Available on Amazon, as he said. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for your time, Dan.
Let's do it again, James. Thank you.
You bet. Bye for now.